There's something magic about interest-led learning, especially when you're in proximity to somebody who's already a little bit better than you
Yeah.
or a master at that skill. There's a big problem right now in society of kind of godlessness in general. There's this absent purpose, higher purpose in so many people's lives. Best careers follow this nonlinear path. Probably one of the biggest things people get wrong is,
Welcome on the podcast, Mitchell. It's great to have you here today.
yeah, man, happy to join you.
Yeah, so you're the CEO of Praxis, which is a alternate college educational like apprenticeship program. And one thing that you're very vocal about is kind of the relevance of a college degree in the modern age. And could you kind of, just to get started, share your story of your college experience and what kind of led you to be so vocal about this subject?
Yeah, that's a that's quite the leading question because there's
Yeah.
there's there's so much of my own personal journey that sort of weaves into Praxis and ultimately what uh led me to Praxis. I was your typical high achieving student, from elementary to junior high, high school. I had a very clear vision from a young age what I wanted to do. Um, I wanted to I wanted to pursue something very prestigious, that had awesome earning potential. And I didn't think about it necessarily in those terms as a kid, but that was kind of part of the allure of it. But growing up, what happened was I liked school. I was good at it. I loved to read. It came natural and easy to me, and I felt like I got put in a bucket, which I was proud to be in this bucket as a kid. But they kind of when you have those traits, people start to bucket you as a smart kid. And I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Went to a small school, graduated with 24 students, so like very very
Wow.
small. But
Mhm.
kind of the traditional arc, when you come from small town America, is smart kids go off to college and then pursue careers somewhere else, especially if you're in a rural area. And so I felt like there was this immense amount of pressure that I didn't really realize until I actually went and made that leap.
Mhm.
But growing up, I felt like I had to reach as high as I could, and I had to have an impressive sounding answer when people asked me, "What are you going to do? You're a smart kid. You must have some type of really ambitious plan." So, and I thought, um, I read a book by Dr. Ben Carson when I was a young kid. I was like 6 or 7 at the time. His book was called Gifted Hands. And I knew from that moment on, I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. Like I wanted to go pursue this elite academic, prestigious thing. But, really I was just interested in it because I thought it was um, it sounded like the most challenging, um, interesting thing that I had heard about. As a kid, you don't really know much as a kid, but and I love to learn, and so I set my sights on this really ambitious target, and I worked at it very hard, and I took my study seriously, and I played the school game and tried to look good on paper, and you know, crushed tests. And by the time I got out of college, I had sort of my pick of colleges. I had those opportunities. I had great scholarships, and that's when I really started to think, this is a big decision. Is this really what I want to do? I
Yeah.
was looking at sort of the high end, top tier front page schools where, even with great scholarships, I was still going to look at a pretty substantial amount of student debt. Then I had, kind of that like second and third tier of schools, state schools, other good, but not as, not like Ivy League schools where I had really good scholarships. I could probably get by with minimal student debt in undergrad. Um, and that was kind of the beginning of a crisis of conscience. Part of me was like, how certain am I that this is the path that I want to go? Because I'm at an inflection point where I'm about to be completely locked into this plan. And I think that, at 18 years old, this was the first time that I really started to seriously question and evaluate how committed am I to this plan that
Mhm.
I've been excited by as a kid, because I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about other options. I just fixated on this as a kid, and I just figured it was going to work out. But as I started kind of staring down what that actual time commitment and financial commitment was going to be like, I started to have second guesses, and then everything kind of came to a headway when I went off to college. I decided to go to this state school. Fortunately, that decision meant that I ended up graduating with no student debt. But at the time, I was bored. It was a lot of the same. School was very easy, especially the first 2 years where it was just like repeating a lot of the stuff that I'd already done. And I didn't feel like I needed to go to class to make good grades. But I still was kind of telling myself this story of like, well, I'll go to medical school. If I change my mind, I'll go to law school. I'll do something prestigious. But I was really unhappy with the circumstances because it was moving slow. I felt like I was, taking a bunch of classes I wasn't really interested in. But I was getting involved on campus as much as I could and like trying to play the game of school still. About that same time, first year into school, I got involved with an early stage startup, and that's when everything changed. I got involved with this. It was a very early stage media company that was growing quickly. I got to be kind of a glorified intern and play a somewhat important role early on in some of the work that they were doing, and it like totally opened my eyes to this entirely different world out there. I ended up working with this company for 3 years until I graduated. And during that span, this company grew from like a handful, half dozen people or something like that to like several thousand employees across the entire country. And it just exploded. And there were a lot of things that I noticed about that. One was just the idea of like rapid growth like that. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never heard of anything like that. One of the other things that was maybe an epiphany moment that I didn't appreciate enough at the time was I had this class. I had this class that I don't even remember what the assignment was, but it was basically like you're coming up with an idea to use a social media tool to solve a real world problem. And meanwhile, I was literally working in this real business where we were trying to solve problems to grow faster, drive revenue, reach new customers, improve the quality of the content that the team was creating. And I was using all these tools and new apps and things like this, and there wasn't any right answer. It was just trying a bunch of stuff and like seeing what worked. And I remember in this class, there were like grades given out based on what the professor thought like was the best idea. And I just thought I remember thinking, this is so stupid. Yeah. Like this is just so stupid. I'm in here like trying to get a stamp of approval in this class when in the real world, like the best ideas are naturally rising to the top, and you're just testing a bunch of stuff and you're seeing what works and you're building off of that. And there was something about the relationship between the styles of learning that I felt like I was somewhat trapped in school. There was this like linear learning path and you had to go at the pace of the class, and a lot of it was filtered through this like somewhat political bureaucratic lens of like you've got to be on the professor's good side, because there's outside of the hard science classes that I was taking, there was a lot of subjectivity and like, oh well, a professor could say this essay is good and this one's bad. And but in the real world it was like you just try stuff, you see what works, you move on, and you're moving quickly. And there's no right answer, there's no playbook, you're just trying to figure things out. And it's this more entrepreneurial learning style. And so by the time I graduated, I became just entirely disillusioned with the idea of like learning, college-based learning, school-based learning, and was fascinated with this idea of entrepreneurship. I didn't know how to go start a business. I didn't know what business. I just knew I want to be in this world. I want to figure out how to position myself where I can work in that type of environment. And as I graduated college, everyone basically told me you should go to law school or get an MBA because that's the safest, surest route. And so that was kind of another pivotal, milestone. I won't get too into the weeds right now because I'm sure there's other things that are worth unpacking here, but that's kind of like laying the groundwork for everything that would come later that would ultimately lead me to Praxis.
Yeah, I think I was reading this book by Ivan Illich on deschooling society, and he has this really good quote, I think, that kind of encapsulates kind of what you're saying, because we kind of monopolize the school as the number one place for learning, and they do so at such a conformist, standardized way it makes almost every other single learning style as irrelevant. But I wanted to ask, what's how do humans learn best? Because is there like research or science behind effective learning? Because I know like lectures and homework sometimes doesn't really cut it for learning the most. So are there like any ways that people can learn better?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's tons of different studies out there about, different learning styles and things like that, and then just, natural, like retention based on how you've learned something. If you listen to it versus you read it versus
Hmm.
you write it out versus you engage with it versus like experiential based learning. I think there's, if you research, you probably find it, there's like a pyramid of learning styles and like the value of those learnings and things like that.
Hmm.
I can tell you from my own experience, and this is, backed by my experience, not just my personal experience, but having worked with thousands of young adults, and having been in, a lot of different higher education spaces. My experience with higher education as well is like, I've always learned best experientially when it's something I'm interested in, when it's more self-directed, and then I have access to somebody who is a little bit farther along than me.
Mm.
And I think that there are component parts of that do make sense within the context of college. Especially in like STEM. You look at STEM, there's like hard science skills, there's labs, you're working with, somebody. It is somewhat of an informal apprenticeship in some of those fields, but a lot of other things, especially like liberal arts, you're interacting with a lot of ideas that you're not really sure how they apply in the real world, and they're somewhat abstract, and it's difficult to apprentice and like really experience with those ideas. I'll give you another example of like, let's use a hard skill like accounting. Um, I remember just not really enjoy. I've always loved math, like a
Hmm.
numbers guy. I've loved it. Took every level of math in high school and then college, and just always something that fired me up. But I took accounting and like macro econ and micro econ in college and things like those classes and statistics, and a lot of those classes were just totally boring to me. And part of it was I just missed the context. It wasn't something that I saw this direct application to like solving a problem in my own life. But I can tell you, once I got out in the real world, especially once I started working in startups, those were skills that I became obsessed with. Everything from accounting to learning more about statistics, and then learning about like financial modeling and data analysis and all those things that like I took classes, and they weren't things that I wasn't in a moment where I saw this as an important skill, especially given my goals at the time when I was learning them. But once they became these skills that I was really interested in, and they felt critical to my overarching goals, um, they became things that I felt like I was being dragged by my or pulled by my interests rather than like dragged to learn this thing. And so, when I set out to learn that, I happened to be in a great environment where, the founder that I was apprenticing was a CPA. I worked with about 40 different accountants. I worked for some different, finance pros. I was interacting with venture capitalists and investors on a regular basis. I already had a really good foundation of some of these skills, like theoretically, but I really got to roll up my sleeves and learn. And I had all these people who were like way farther along on their journey that I could turn to, and I could ask advice, and I could, pick up things that I might not have learned just from a textbook or a course or things like that. And so, I bring up those experiences just to kind of illustrate like there's something magic about interest-led learning, especially when you're in proximity to somebody who's already a little bit better than you,
Yeah.
or a master at that skill, that can not only help you learn more effectively, but really in an accelerated timeline.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because, throughout high school, I've been having several mentors because I play piano, and it has led me to become really good, like one of the top pianists in the state because of that. And the value of apprenticeship is severely underrated because, when we look at the education system, it's not really on a one-to-one mentor basis. It's more like a one to however many students are there that goes
Yeah.
at the same pace. So I think in that sense, the learning model is already pretty ineffective in many schools that don't, have the capabilities to offer this mentorship to an individual students. So I think you really touched on an important point here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think part of it too is, this was part of my college experience too, is like, especially when I was still kind of medical school bound, like I felt like a lot of the classes, they weren't really designed to make sure students were learning so much as they were there to filter students out who weren't serious about pursuing that path.
Mhm.
So everything seemed like it was designed to get people to naturally self-select out of a particular major rather
Mhm.
than really trying to transfer knowledge and understanding and get people fired up. I saw so many of my peers, they changed their major 6 months, 12 months into a particular degree path because um, they became intimidated, or they're like, hey, this is too hard, or this is something I'm not
Mhm.
not interested in. I think that happens too. Is um, it's not so much about helping ignite fires for and love for learning and kind of deepen knowledge and understanding. A lot of times there's also kind of the insidious side of higher education where we're trying to make sure that only the most serious people make it through to the next round.
Mhm. Yeah. Why do you think more? Why do you think more people aren't following their curiosity and their interests?
I mean, the surface level answers that I think a lot of people have their curious just completely dampened, or
Mhm.
they have a bucket of water thrown on their fire, their intellectual fire at a young age. In the traditional school system, I think this is the case. The traditional school model tends to value conformity and knowing how to come up with the right answer, rather than following your curiosity and figure out novel solutions to things. I think at the same time, people aren't really people aren't really being young students, kids, if you will. I don't think they're really
Mhm.
being put in environments where they are allowed to pursue their curiosity. I think a lot of times it's you've got to go do these things that are absolutely necessary, even if they're not interesting to you, and it begins to harbor this negative relationship with learning.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many young adults I've interacted with over the years that by the time they leave high school, they're just like totally done. They're so fatigued from being told what to do,
Mhm.
and especially when they're you got to take a bunch of classes you may not be interested in, and you don't feel like they're relevant, and people don't really have a good environment at that age to just pursue the things that's interesting. Nope, it's time for math class. 20 minutes later, it's time for English. The bell rings, it's time for history. The bell rings, you got to go to the next
Mhm.
thing. That's not really how people learn. People,
Yeah.
especially when you're obsessed with a new thing, you want to just go read every book. You want to go
Mhm.
interact with this thing. You want to just like be completely consumed by this new thing you're interested in. And that's not really how school is set up. And that's a negative thing. I think there are plenty of opportunities outside of school to still pursue your interests, but I also think that a lot of kids don't have the freedom and flexibility and opportunity to do that. Even without finger wagging at the school system or at parents, like I don't think a lot of parents even know or understand. They went through these same systems. They see education as the path to the good life because that's the way that it used to be 30, 40 years ago. There was a predictable path, not just to the American dream, but like financial success, social status, stability, all of those things. Um, so it's almost like parents have the wrong frame of reference about the way the world has changed, the actual outcomes, and kind of the necessity of instilling this love for learning and creating more opportunities outside of traditional school for their kids to just pursue their interests. Because I mean, the businesses of the future, we're already seeing things created. They're going to look less and less like traditional career paths that existed on the education conveyor belt the way they did,
Mhm. Right.
10, 20, 50 years ago. And I think it's only going to become more important that younger generations have the opportunities to really dig in deep in the things they're interested in and figure out how to pursue those things in a meaningful way. That's ultimately how innovation goes on, is like people become obsessed with particular topics or problems or things like that. And they're able to continue to feed their curiosity rather than having that, that hampered, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like when we dull our curiosity and our love for learning, I think that might, maybe that's a theory, but it might correlate to our negative perception of work, that we kind of associate work as something that's like, tedious, boring, just like, doing homework. But work can in fact be really fun. And same with learning. So I think there definitely needs to be like a shift that's happening, from going from something that's boring to something that's actually fun, and, following your genuine curiosity and interest.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. I think I was looking at this graph a while ago, which was saying how before 1981, people believed, or most college freshmen believed, that developing a meaningful philosophy of life was more important than being well off financially. And ever since 1981, that chart has basically reversed. So does that strike you as concerning, or do you think more people should focus more on the philosophy of developing a good life?
That's a that's an interesting statistic, one that I haven't come across, but I would say it's not something that's surprising to me. Other statistics that seem to be revealing is like, there's a hodgepodge of different studies that attack this in a different ways, like the decline of spiritual belief, the decline in faith, the decline in church attendance,
Yeah.
the increase in mental health crises, especially among younger generations over the past like 10, 20, 30 years. Along with that, like the increase in, medication among younger age cohorts to treat different types of, anxiety, mental health crises, whatever. I think, rise in depression, rise in teen suicide rates, all of these, there's like all these other telling statistics that I think somewhat mirror that. And so
Yeah.
based on my own lived experience, plus what I see in the world today, I think it's very difficult to go through life without some sense of higher meaning. That's always any point in my life, especially those college years where I felt like I was lost because I had this perfect plan that I suddenly lost. And I was searching for sort of this greater meaning, this greater like target to aim at. I stopped going to church at that time in my life too, and I kind of like strayed from my faith. And I would say like my world crumbled because a lot of those things. I felt like I didn't have a North Star anymore, both in terms of like the higher meaning that gave purpose to everything that I was doing. And I didn't really have a defined target that I was aiming at, like something I was trying to achieve and make of myself. I think absent those things, the tendency towards nihilism becomes very, very strong. The tendency towards atheism and nihilism, and just, again, I'm not talking about this from a religious perspective. Like I mean the individuals just crying out for needing some sense of higher purpose to fill the void. Like I think so many young adults in the world we live in today, they look out and they see all of these terrible headlines about, global warming or recession impending or the inflation rate and the cost of college and the likelihood that they're never going to be able to buy a home and they're never going to be able to make ends meet financially, and like the likelihood that they ever get to a point financially or socially is it's totally out of reach. And I think a natural response to that is it doesn't matter. None of it matters anymore. And I think that creates an enormous barrier to attaching yourself to some higher meaning, because once you begin to adopt this idea or mindset that like nothing matters, it's kind of like it's kind of like turning your brain off. It's difficult to continue to have a growth mindset or to have optimism or a hope, which I think are the seeds of not only like actually creating a better future, but believing that it's possible that you can create a better future for yourself, let alone the world. So yeah, to bring it full circle, like, yes, I think it's absolutely important that people have some sense of higher meaning, however they find that. You know, my personal flavor is like I have found more meaning in my faith and allowing those values that I take from my faith to spill over into the other areas of my life. Like the reason I like to work with young adults is because I remember distinctly that time in my life when I lost that positive roadmap for my future. It's something that like really hung me up, and like I made a lot of mistakes that I think I ended up spending several years trying to correct and get my career and life back on track. You know, because I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to accomplish, and that is an important sort of mission field for me, if
Mhm.
you will, because it's where I feel like I have the opportunity to make the biggest impact, even if it's not the largest in scope, you know, not able to reach the most people, but the quality of impact I'm able to have on the students that I work with. That paired with, you know, I draw a ton of meaning from my work and this, but like having a family, you know, raising you know, raising my daughter, and if we have future kids, with my wife, and like having a good relationship with our extended family, being able to give back to our community and help out when I can, and like generally have some kind of standard that I'm aiming for in my own life, the way I conduct myself, the way I interact with those people. That all of those things have been more enriching than any of the financial gains, you know, at any point in time in my career. And I
Mhm.
think that, you know, when I was setting out on my journey, I had, you know, especially as I kind of lost my vision for the future, I flipped it all upside down. And I like, absent those things that were adding higher meaning and purpose to my life, like it does feel like a lot of it is pointless. And it's hard to feel like you're really excited about the future, even if you still are ambitious. It's like you can you can be ambitious without any sense of higher meaning, and you can begin to have success. And what's waiting at the top of that hill is you look up and you're like, I'm not really satisfied. What else is there? And so I think it's a recurring theme. And I don't think it's just limited to like college students. I think there's a big problem right now in society of just kind of godlessness in general. And I mean that to
Mhm.
encompass, you know, not just like Christian faith, or I just mean like there's this absent purpose, higher purpose in so many people's lives. And I think that that's probably at the root. If I had to like give you one quick answer, like I think
Mhm.
that's at the root of a lot of the problems we see in the world today.
Yeah. And I think like what I've been seeing a lot is like, the endless hoop jumping rat race that's been going on, and it's not just college, but it's kind of like set up as when we're in childhood, kind of we have to, tick all these boxes that lead from one to the next, which kind of never ends at all. And how can we like break free from that? Because I know that lead can lead to a lot of burnouts, a lot of, mental health problems. So how can someone be aware of that and be able to take the necessary steps to kind of step away from that and live life more intentionally and more grounded?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to personal agency,
Mhm.
having ownership over your life, and then being intentional to design your life in the way that you want it. And I mean that multidimensionally. So your life, your career, your relationships, your financial standing, your, you know, contribution to your community, where you live, all of the different buckets of your life. And we all have these buckets. But I think that a lot of times people make career decisions financially or based on some type of extrinsic factor. You know, I think that the
Mhm.
two common ones tend to be money or status. You know, I'm going to go work for this because it's a name that it's a company name, or it's a job title that when I tell other people, they're going to be impressed, and it's going to give me a dopamine hit because they're going
Mhm.
to think I'm impressive and I'm going to feel impressive. And that's a form of compensation from you know, this particular opportunity. I think the other one is monetary. You know, people chase money, they chase status, but those are really low on the rungs when it comes to like what actually produces meaning and fulfillment and life satisfaction. And I think that I think that people, in order to make that leap, I'll just give you my own example here is like,
Mhm.
I had to get really clear about what my career values were. I think one of the trade-offs that I kind of had to come face to face with is like, at a younger age, I was very driven by money,
Mhm.
by earning potential, by income. I knew it was like, I want to make a ton of money. And I didn't realize this took me, I was so dumb and naive, but like what I really wanted was I wanted autonomy. I wanted freedom. I wanted the opportunity to um, be able to work on cool things that were exciting and also like be a blessing to my family and friends. And I think it took me way too many years, probably embarrassingly enough, to like get concrete about what does it actually mean?
Mhm.
Okay, how much money? Is there a number that I'd ever be satisfied? Okay, what am I actually trying to do with this? And like realize, okay, well, this thing that I'm chasing is actually a tool. And the target that I actually need to have what I really want, it's much lower. And so like that was a baby step. And I think
Mhm.
as I went down that path and tried to get more clear about, what is it going to take to be able to attain the kind of wealth that I want. That's an enabler to have the kind of life I want. And then you begin to start thinking about other areas as you have a little bit of success. It's like, okay, well, what's my optimum relationship with my career, my work? Am I going to am I commuting 2 hours both ways to an office every day and working for somebody I don't respect in a company that I'm not really excited about what they're doing? Or am I working on a problem I am really fired up by? I get to work remotely from wherever. I get to work with an awesome team on a problem I really care about. I think when you start to get really intentional about these different domains of your life and
Mhm.
what it would actually look like if it was the best version of it, what happens is those compound. Tackle your money first, or tackle your career first, or tackle your relationships first. But as you begin to address each one of those areas of your life, they have this positive compounding effect that spills over into the other bucket, and it spills
Mhm.
over into the other bucket. And what happens over time is you take back agency because you're approaching each of these different areas of your life with much more intentionality,
Right.
which gives you ownership. And that ownership, it allows you to be present and show up better in all these different areas because you're not making decisions because you feel like you have to or because somebody else told you you have to. You're doing them because you have a very clear sense of purpose about what your life is and what you want it to look like. And I mean that across all these different domains. And I don't think it happens overnight. And
Right.
in fact, I don't
Mhm.
think it happens often over the course of a few months. I think it's, a process that you're always going to be working on to become ever more intentional about, what your life and career and relationships and all these different domains look like. But those are some of the things that I would say is like start by fixing one area of your life first and then try and compound from there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I guess transitioning to the topic of like building a career, what are some like skills that you see in the modern age that are really worthwhile and, ROI positive for someone, in their 20s to develop early on that can serve them, in the long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, there's a few different ways to look at this. There's
Mhm.
like your traditional like white collar career path. You want to be an employee. I would say, and there's a function of that, like what kind of money do you want to make? I would
Mhm.
say sales is probably one of the most valuable in demand skills that's not going anywhere anytime soon. How sales are done is going to change, but if you can learn how to sell, you're kind of building a foundational skill that is going to give you optionality. That's transferable in different career paths, but it's also something that is a good building block if you ever want to go start your own business. It's a skill that I would say gives you high agency.
Mhm.
The reason that I'll 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 add to that it's high agency is it's one where you have a closer relationship between your ability to deliver results and your ability to drive your income, which I think is a sort of that's a prerequisite of having high agency is you have control. It's very different from skills that lead to like salary jobs where
Mhm.
you're kind of subject to the whims of your employer or the marketplace, how large of a salary you can command. I mean, there's countless skills in like emerging tech right now and like emerging um, domains that I would say, yeah, those are trending right now. maybe there's a lot of upside if you can position yourself on the, the edge of one of these emerging industries.
Yep.
So, obviously things like AI and defense tech seems to be, burgeoning again, but like there's this resurgence of like more efficient domestic manufacturing in the US. And I think a big space in that is like energy. There's all those different things. So like hard sciences, there's definitely still opportunities there. The trades are also not going anywhere. And in fact, there's a massive decline of people retiring in the trades right now that, I mean, you can go make six figures probably in a matter of a few years if you go pursue a job in the trades. Other skills that I think are just generally valuable is like, I think a good way to think about your career is you are the CEO of your career. And to that end,
Right.
thinking of yourself as a business or a full stack offering to the market. So that's, you should know a little bit of sales. You should know a little bit of marketing. You should, be good at communication. You should have a basic understanding of accounting, finance, have some operational ability. There are skills that kind of parse into each one of those buckets. And then, a hard skill is great. Whether it's a traditional hard skill, things like, accounting, finance, software engineering, sales, marketing, whatever it is. Like if you can approach your career like that, like, hey, I'm trying to build this awesome stack of skills that put me in demand. Like that's a great precursor for continuing to increase agency. Rather than trying to just overly specialize in one skill. Like we don't understand the full impacts of how AI and emerging technology is going to shape the landscape longer term. But I think if you can, the best hedge you can do is like continue to add to your skill set in all these different domains so that you are able to continually produce value regardless of the landscape that you're in.
Yeah, I think it was Naval who said, if you can learn to sell and build, then you'll pretty much be unstoppable. So I think
Yep.
the skills that you covered are pretty much bang on in terms of, either one of those two domains. Yeah, what's like a career practice that you did differently than many people years ago that perhaps have led to bewilderments or stares, but that served you ultimately in the long term?
Fantastic question. So, the first thing that jumps out to me is I think there's this really bad idea about how careers are supposed to unfold. And it's totally wrong because it's not how most people's career unfold, but it's this idea of like linear career paths where you start here, then you go, you take one order, one order of magnitude increase, but along the same plane. And you go from like, the entry level marketer to the marketing associate to the junior marketer to the marketing manager to the, director of marketing to the VP to the C. Like it's this very linear path that stair steps one step at a time.
Yeah.
And any deviations from that are bad. They're not just not productive, but they're actually net negative. That's not how people's careers progress. I think the best careers follow this nonlinear path where sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down, sometimes you take two steps back as you're trying to like discover the right path, the right product market career fit for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that happened early on in my career is like I was a few weeks out from law school to start law school in an MBA program. Down this path, everybody's patting me on the back. Yeah, this is going to be great. It satisfies everybody's questions, because it's something impressive. If you're somebody that people think has potential, like you're giving them an answer that they're not going to ask any follow-up questions really. Like you're doing what we expect of you. Instead of doing that, I went and moved across the country to take a low-paying job apprenticing the CEO of a startup in a city where I didn't know anybody, working for a company that I'd learned about like 2 weeks prior to accepting this opportunity, and unenrolled in law school in an MBA program. And it was very much posturing myself in a role and a status that was below what I think the expectation for what I should be doing was. I was a college grad. Why should I go like have this glorified internship. I should be taking this awesome high status job and things like that. And I think that alarmed a lot of people. But it was one of those things where I was like, I'm pushing all my chips into this cool opportunity because it's the thing that excites me most. And I see this awesome path to upside and learning all the things that I want to do around people that I know I'm going to benefit from learning from, working on a company that is doing a reasonably cool enough thing that it sounds interesting to me. And I'm so glad that I mustered the courage to do that, because it was kind of a terrifying decision to make, but like that opportunity was the beginning of this awesome growth curve. And it's not just because it was a right company, right time, but I think some of those other factors are really important. It was something I was really excited by, where I was eager to learn, where I was willing to just like do whatever it takes to make sure that I had success. And talk about like putting skin in the game. Like there was kind of this like fallout, like people were a little bit shocked that I made this decision. And I think that just added another log to my fire of personal motivation. Is like, I'm getting what I came here for. Like, I'm going to make this work hell or high water. And, honestly, that was the beginning of, what ended up changing my life. Like that cool career opportunity, just, deciding to bet on myself rather than the way people think a career is supposed to unfold.
Yeah. I guess on a similar note, in terms of like, a more, I guess, self-directed career, interest-led path, what is something that about careers that most people can skip entirely? Like, is there like a process or step that is not really necessary in terms of getting the fulfilling career that you want?
Yeah, I mean, like college is the obvious thing, but I would just say credentials at large are typically one of the things that, like, if credentials are important to you, they're almost always never the right first step into something you're interested in. Often a better first step is like, go interview 25 people that are doing the thing you think you're interested in. Build some relationships, get to know those people, build the relationships for a variety of reasons. One, you're going to find a bunch of people who are probably, especially if you're a student and you tell them that, like, probably going to find a bunch of people who are fired up to invest in your personal development and help you build a path to where you're trying to go. But you're also going to, build this awesome network of people who may be able to help get your foot in the door. You're also going to learn more about this path you think you want to go down, and collect a lot of useful data that you can use to validate or invalidate this path you think you want to go down. And I think that's the thing. That's probably one of the biggest things people get wrong, is the level of conviction they have about the thing they think they want to do. It's largely based on assumptions and not experiential learning or real due diligence. They get a hunch that they think they want to do this thing, and then they begin to base decisions on this hunch rather than this like informed intuition, which is, I've actually done research. I've actually gone and shadowed some people. I've mapped out what the costs of this decision are, not just financially, but the time it's going to take. I know how hard it is. I'm walking into this decision with my eyes wide open. And after all of that, I still know absolutely this is what I want to do. That takes, probably a lot of maturity to come up with that on your own, because again, that's not how we're taught to go start our careers. But I think if you do that, not only are you going to be making higher conviction bets, but your entry point is going to be, it's going to come a lot easier, because you're going to build this network. You're going to have much higher context. It's going to become a little bit more immediately obvious to you what skills you should build, what you should do in order to access the types of opportunities you want to do. You want to, school may be a part of that journey at some point, but a lot of times it's not the right first step. The other thing that I would say, and this is a little bit off an offshoot of what I just laid out, is so many times if you're willing to do the job before you get the job, you can get the job you want, even if you don't have the right experience or, a long track record of using those skills in a professional context. So, I'll give one, I'll reference sales because this is another easy example, but like most sales jobs, they get flooded with applications from people who just do the bare minimum on applications, but they're not really signaling, hey, I'm a good salesperson in those job applications. You know what most salespeople do? They pick up the phone and they're cold calling their potential customers, or they're sending cold emails, they're doing cold outreach, then they're following up. Go do that. That's literally the job you're applying for. That's how you get the job, is do the job. Like, go cold call the hiring manager, send them a cold email, send them a cold direct message on LinkedIn, follow up with them until you get a meeting. And if you do that, when you apply to a sales job, you're probably already going to be in, the top percentile of candidates, because you've shown them you can do the job by doing it before you have it. And that's just one illustration. Like, there are different ways you can go about like showing somebody you're able to doing the job, even outside of sales. But those are a few that I think the easy things people can do to make a lot of progress in the direction they want to head.
Yeah, I love the idea, doing the job before you get the job. I think there's this idea of called like permissionless apprenticeship, which is kind of, you basically offer the value in advance before, instead of, them asking you to provide value. I think that's such a genius
Yep.
idea. And I think, more people should kind of implement that to land their dream job or their dream career. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess
I mean, I've
yeah,
heard,
go
I've heard even of somebody like, you can offer to work for free, I think is another good example, but I've even heard of somebody like, he literally pitched the company. It was an early stage startup. So,
Yeah.
money's tight already, but he's like, I will literally pay you all my first 2 months salary if you hire me in this role. And I don't know if they actually made him do it or not, but he got the job. And again, like, I think a lot of people would balk at that and be like, that's exploitation or whatever. But it's like, we're not saying everybody should do this, but it's damn sure a way to stand out really well, because like nobody else is doing that. So like, when you're on the job hunt, you're trying to manufacture a really strong signal. That's a really strong signal, differentiates you from everybody else.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I guess we could transition to talking about Praxis, because you can kind of finish up the story that you started from the first question on how like your journey has led you to working at Praxis and now ultimately becoming the CEO of the company.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So I alluded in a couple of different answers, like, here's kind of what I did. And, I ended up going and apprenticing the CEO of this early stage startup. I was a few years out of college. I had taken, dozens of different jobs. I started a freelance photography business. I'd worked in financial advising for about a year. Then I worked at a law firm. Then I went and worked at an economics think tank. I managed a pizza franchise somewhere in there. I was doing freelance writing as well, some freelance marketing, graphic design stuff. But I was just trying a ton of different things. And I was like trying to figure out the thing that fired me up while also trying to make a little bit of money. And I kept telling people I was going to law school and MBA. Like, I was making money, saving it up so I could go to law school without taking a lot of debt. And, what ended up happening is, I was working, this series of happy accidents just unfolded. I was working in financial advising for about a year, right out of college. It's one of my first jobs out of college. I didn't feel like this was the right path. I thought I was going to go to law school still. And so I parlayed that experience to land a job working for a law firm. The law firm did estate planning and tax litigation. They loved that I had experience in financial advising, especially was pretty knowledgeable about life insurance. That was part of the reason they hired me. I had a freelance photography business that I'd started in college. I was doing that on the side. One day, my boss brought me into his office. He's a very esteemed attorney, fantastic attorney. But he set me down, had an honest conversation with me. He's like, hey, if you ever want to be a serious attorney, you need to stop screwing off with photography. You need to like get serious and go all in on this path. And at that point in my life, I wasn't 100% convicted that I wanted to be an attorney. And I felt like that was bad advice for me, given where I was at. And so I was like, I quit. I put in my notice. I left. I didn't have a job, but that motivated me to figure out fast. Um, I ended up using my freelance photography experience to land an awesome job working for an economics think tank, doing event photography all over the country. They're putting on these events, bringing in different awesome speakers. I was really interested in philosophy, economics, and doing photography. It was kind of like a perfect fit. I parlayed these interests into the next opportunity. One of those conferences, I happened to meet the Praxis founder, and we hit it off immediately. And just, it was like an immediate like almost felt like divine intervention. Like I was telling him my story. He was like, "You seem like an ambitious, hardworking dude. Like, what if I make some introductions for you?" He's like, "There's no, like, why would you go back to school?" He's like, "Give me 1 year. I'm going to make some introductions for you, some people that are working on awesome stuff." And he's like, "If 1 year from now you don't feel like you have things more figured out, go back to school. It's always going to be there." And I was like, "Sure, what the hell? Like, this is the best bet I have. So I'm going to push my chips in."
Mhm.
That ended up leading to, this awesome opportunity to go work directly for this founder CEO. That opportunity, I spent a little over 3 years working as kind of the right hand to the CEO. I came in as like the lowest man on the totem pole, glorified intern. When I left 3.5 years later, I was the youngest executive on the team. The company had been growing at like 200 to 500% year over year. I got to I got to learn, like felt like I got paid to get an MBA in the real world instead of going and paying
Mhm.
to get an MBA. And I kind of reached this point where it's like, I know how to win the game now. I've had success. I've had these hypotheses of like what I think I want to do and how to go about doing it, and I figured it out. So I actually left that company to go launch a software company with part of the Praxis team. Originally, we built this job hunting platform, and it was kind of like in that same transition that like I got really fired up with helping people navigate the early innings of the journey that like I felt like I struggled with.
Mhm.
Um, I knew that I wanted to run a business. I knew I wanted to be in a position where I could have high impact. Um, there was kind of some perfect timing to this situation. But it was also Praxis was something I was really fired up about and was near and dear to my heart. And so kind of had this cool opportunity to come in, help take over the business and work with people that were in that life stage where I'd say like this was a really purposeful problem for me to solve. Is like helping people navigate that area where I felt like I got hung up the most. And so that's why it still fires me up even to this day, is like that's a problem that's deeply meaningful and important for me to solve. And I get to work with students day in and day out doing that.
Yeah, amazing, man. Yeah, for those who aren't really familiar with Praxis, what makes it different than a normal university? And, what are some success stories you've seen, working with these students that have gone through
It,
Praxis?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally unlike university. We did not try to reinvent college. It is something entirely different.
Hmm.
It's a 9 month long career mentorship program. We're going to help you build skills. We're going to help you explore different career paths. We're going to help you build your professional network. We're going to help you navigate the early job market. You're going to work one on one with a mentor who's going to help you figure out not just, hey, what skills, what career paths do you want to pursue and try to develop, but what do you want your life and career to look like? Let's help you build a roadmap. And we're going to help you make some awesome connections with people who have already gone out and had success in their early careers. And they can act as informal mentors. They can offer you a template of how they went and pursued their thing. You're going to build hard skills through the program, going through our curriculum, our project-based learning. You're going to have feedback from your mentors and peers on those. So you will learn in an accelerated timeline. And then in terms of like what happens after that, most of our students, they want to pursue jobs, and we are there to offer them our support, our resources, our coaching as they navigate the job market. We've helped nearly 1,000 students over the past decade since Praxis began navigate the job market. Like we're there to give them advice and teach them a process on how they can actually succeed on the job market. Um, when it comes to what we've been able to do over the past decade, there are so many success stories that jump out. I was talking to an alumni yesterday, actually catching up, and he thought he was going to go to college to play basketball. Was a
Hmm.
very, very talented athlete. That didn't end up panning out. He knew he wanted to work hard. He thought he wanted to work in marketing. He ended up having a cool opportunity to uh, go work in sales. And he had like focused on building awesome skills, but some of the network that he'd built ended up opening up some cool opportunities. He did this when he was 17. He landed his first job in sales at 17. By 18, he was clearing six figures. He has gone on to have multiple promotions. Then he ended up getting poached to go build a sales team. Then he ended up going and launching his own sales consultancy. But he is a sales expert to this day, like these days.
Wow.
And 5, 6 years out on his own, he's in his early 20s, making great money. He has built an awesome professional reputation and brand for himself. He's built an awesome business. He's had a ton of success. That's what I'd say is like an awesome outcome for students.
Yeah.
I don't even think it has to be that scale to have an awesome outcome. You know, there are countless students that have gone and had the awesome career earnings. You know, they're, you know, within their early 20s, they're like making 6 figures. They have a lot of freedom, flexibility. But I think what's more important when I think about success, it's less about here's what your outcome has to look like tangibly in terms of the job you have or the money you're making or the company you're working for. I think more it's I want our students to have a sense of agency and ownership over their career path. And I want them to have a roadmap for their futures. And that may not mean that at graduation, they have their dream job and dream life. A lot of times that's not how it happens.
Yeah.
But instead, they have a really strong vision of where the direction they want to head. And they've made a remarkable start. A lot of times that start is their first job or landing their first freelance client or publishing a book or launching a podcast or getting a promotion or, you know, some other version, you know, working with a mentor one-on-one, like they have the ability to customize their goals and we'll offer them support. But really at the end of the day, what I think matters most is like helping our students increase the agency they have over their lives and their career journey.
That's amazing. Yeah. I guess first, going on this topic of college, just to wrap up, for students who are on the fence on whether or not to go to college, what are some things you would say to them to help them have perhaps more clarity in their decision?
Yeah, I mean, take a gap year. There's no rush.
Mm-hmm.
There's no rush. College has been around for hundreds of years. Like it's not going anywhere. I know there's a ton of pressure to feel like you got to just jump in with both feet, but especially there's no rush if you have to turn to student debt. Um, you're on the hook for that. Like, and if you're not 100% convicted, like, don't go. I think a better way, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, like a better way to navigate forward is one, go get work experience, but two, go interview 50 people, 100 people, 20 people that are in the different paths you think you're interested in. Go and gain context, do that due diligence, try and shadow some people, try and get a better feel and vivid image of like what the things you're interested in actually require and what they cost to in order to achieve. And again, that's a function of your time. That's a function of the actual financial cost, the amount of stress and pain and suffering that it takes to go from where you're at to where you think you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a function of the opportunity cost. Like, yeah, everybody wants to have a doctor's salary, but not everybody wants to go 10, 15 years of college, undergrad, medical school, residency, and take out tons of student debts in order to get there. So like understanding that opportunity cost is also an important thing. But if you spend the next year, if you're on the fence about college and you spend the next year diligently trying to gain information and clarity about these different interests that you have, while also getting some type of job and work experience where you're earning an income, you're beginning to develop responsible financial habits and like life habits as an adult and beginning to develop independence, I don't think most reasonable parents are going to be alarmed if that's the way you approach the decision. I know most parents, you know, I think that's where a lot of the question comes down to is even the people that are on the fence, a lot of times they feel like they don't have the permission to do something different. And approaching those conversations with their parents or their family members is difficult. Come up with a plan. You know, come check out Praxis if you want help doing that. But, you know, shameless plug there. But like just come up with a plan and be a little sit your parents down and be like, listen, I'm on the fence about college. Here's how I want to spend the next year instead. And I'm going to execute this plan over the next 12 months with the goal of coming out on the other side of this next year with a little bit more clarity about what I want to do. In the meantime, I'm going to start paying my own bills. I'm going to start getting work experience, making money. I'm going to do XYZ things to try and actually gain clarity about these things I'm interested in. And here's roughly what my next year is going to look like. If you do that, you're going to probably spur an awesome conversation, an honest conversation. But then if you actually see that plan through, 12 months from now, you're going to be in a wildly better spot where you feel um, much more equipped to make the decision about whether college is the right next step for you or not. You may, you may even turn out that you find your way into an awesome career that doesn't require you to go.
Yeah.
So I think it really just comes down to being intentional, and not just like making the default decision to go to college because that's what you feel like you're supposed to do.
Yeah, beautiful answer. I feel like intentionality has just been a reoccurring, topic from our discussion today. Yeah, to finish off with one last question, if there
Yeah.
is like one single message you could pass to your 18-year-old self, or for any other young person out there, what's that message going to be?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man. My advice to my 18-year-old self, if I was, if I was not too stubborn to listen to it, would probably be a little bit different than I give the average 18-year-old. But I'll give you kind of both versions of that. For my
Sure.
18-year-old self, I would say stop caring so much about what other people think. I spent so much of the probably 16 to 22-year-old, years worrying not only too much about what other people think, but making sure that each decision I was making was something that got the stamp of approval of others. So even as I was kind of changing paths, I wanted to go about changing that path in a way that I felt like was still given the blessing of other people instead of just being like, listen, this is what I want to do. I'm going full bore here. And I don't care if other people don't understand it or they don't, they're not giving me their thumbs up because I know that I'm going to go figure it out. So that's one of the things, like just figure out how to stop caring about what other people think and not basing your decisions about your own life based on the expectations of others. The other one I'd say is like nothing is as serious as it feels right now. At 17, 18 years old, so many of the decisions you're making feel like they are life or death, or they are that level of magnitude. And over time, you're going to get more reps dealing with big decisions, and the decisions you're facing today are going to feel smaller or less consequential. I know it feels so heavy right now and like there's so much pressure, but don't do that to yourself. You are so young, you're at the start of your journey, and you have so many opportunities to change course if the thing you think you want now doesn't pan out or you change your mind. And so don't build up all this additional internal pressure. There's already a ton of external pressure on you. None of it matters as much as it seems like now. And that's not a cop out to let you off the hook of trying hard or working hard or things like that. But like, you don't have to beat yourself up so much about making the right, perfect decisions right now with your life. Instead, give yourself a little bit of grace and give yourself the permission and freedom to go explore your options and explore the things that are interesting to you and figure out if there's maybe, something else out there that fires you up more than what you've, you know, what you've been considering already.
Yeah. Excellent answers. Well, thanks for being on the conversation today, Mitchell. Where can people like find your work and Praxis?
Yeah, discoverpraxis.com is our, is the business website. I have a twice per week newsletter that goes out there, publish a lot of content there. It's called The Playbook. It's a great resource with a lot more of our content, but it's been a pleasure joining you. Thanks so much for your time and your thoughtful questions, and wish you the best of luck as you keep growing the show.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in.